Welcome in, Tiki Barber. Tiki, Sal Licata here. Appreciate you taking the time to come on. Let's start with the Giants. I mean, we'll get to all other stuff too, but I was talking about the Giants a little bit before, and we buried them over the week, of course. I wanted to ask you, though, specifically, being that you were a great Giants running back, why the hell do they continue to have issues simply running the football? They got the great back. They tried to build enough. Is it scheme? Is it the back? Is it the offensive line? Why can't the Giants run the ball football consistently?
It's a good question, Sal, and appreciate you having me on. But you know what? I think it's all of those things. I think so I remember back when we first started putting in, this is me back in my day, offensive schemes, whether it was outside zone or draws or whatever it is, so much was about footwork, right? And timing based on, how the offensive line was moving or pulling or blocking down or whatever the scheme was. And when I watch the Giants now, I don't see that cohesion. And so what seems to happen, and this is from, looking from afar, obviously not being, in that locker room on the practice field, it looks like Saquon is either there too early or even Booker, or they're like a step late. And so like the details haven't been fully ironed out. Part of that, Sal, as you know, is because the injuries, man. They've just been piling up on this offensive line really since week 1 or 2. So you have had all these interchangeable pieces on the offensive line. It's just hard to get cohesion, and especially now that we have a new coordinator, play caller, so to speak, in Freddie Kitchens. It's just there's not that continuity, and it really hasn't been that way for a while now. And I think that contributes to it. It's also they're just getting beat. Some of these guys just aren't good enough. So it's a bunch of different things that are going wrong at the same time that's creating this ineffectiveness. Honestly, though, I think last week was the first time I saw, some positive, runs, happening on a consistent basis. It wasn't just like 3 yards or 1 yard or -3 yards, and then maybe you get a 20-yarder. It was more, 6-yard run. Here's a 4-yard run. There was more continuity, but it's still not consistent enough to be viable to create a winning, type of situation.
Yeah, and it's just been so frustrating, Tiki, because it's been consistently not there for years, and it just helps everything else along. Now, not to compare them to New England, but you see what you can do in different spots. Had they had a solid running game when they drafted Daniel Jones, now you could bring in a rookie quarterback, put him under center, and say, okay, well, at least we have a good ground game to help out the young quarterback. The Jets are starting to look like they might be doing that now. I thought they could have been better at it earlier in the year, but the Giants, it just hasn't been there. They're all over the place, and they tried to because they drafted a running back number 2 overall, and it still hasn't worked.
I know. Well, I mean, I feel bad for Saquon in a way because it's like you draft a running back number 2 overall if you have every other piece in place. Remember when the Dallas Cowboys did this? I forget when Zeke was. I don't think he was second, but he was top 5 for
4th
sure.
or something.
Yeah, exactly. So remember when they drafted him? It was like, really, Zeke, you gonna take a running back? Is that what you really need? But the answer was they had a great offensive line. And we remember Tony Romo got hurt and Dak Prescott was forced into duty. And so Zeke, with a great offensive line, led the league in rushing as a rookie. And it was like, wow, that was a great pick, right? You had the offensive line already set up because they had drafted well the first couple of previous two or three seasons. And then you get a great running back and it just clicks right away. I think 3 of his first 4 years, he led the league in rushing. And Saquon, conversely, comes to the New York Giants and it's like, all right, who's playing left tackle? Who's playing left guard? All right, who's playing right tackle? And it just like that lack of a plan up front. It hamstrings your really great, top 10, top 5, top 2 in this case, pick at running back in Saquon. So, you almost feel bad for him because it's really hard for any back to have success if those 5 guys in front of you aren't working great together. I don't care how good you were in college.
One more on the Giants, Tiki, before we go around the league a little bit. What would you do here? I mean, look, everybody wants Gettleman gone at this point. What would you do as far as the structure of the organization moving forward? Front office, head coach, what do you think of Joe Judge? How would you handle that next year?
Yeah, I like Joe Judge, and you can't just keep going around firing coaches every 2 or 3 years. That just really exacerbates the problem. I think, one of the issues is, Joe was a special teams coordinator and under a great coach in Bill Belichick, but when you start having to when you start thinking about becoming head coach and then you ultimately become one, you have to understand how to build a staff. And I don't know if that was, top of the list for Joe Judge. Now, I really like Patrick Graham. I think he's gone through some ups and downs this season, but things have simplified and guys have started to play significantly better. And Xavier McKinney's turned into a great playmaker. And so maybe he got that one right. But other pieces, I don't know if it was the right picks, right? So I'm not even thinking about firing Joe Judge. I think he's got the right mentality. I think he can bring the right culture. But you got to start getting better players. And obviously that's on the head of Dave Gettleman, who I really like. Obviously he's a friend, personal friend from my days with the New York Giants. But I think it's time. And I think a lot of people will feel that same way. And I'm sure as the season gets closer towards the end, John Mara will give us a state of the team. And that's one of the moves that's probably going to happen.
Talking with Tiki Barber, you could hear Tiki and Tierney starting January 3rd in this time slot. Tiki, how about the rest of the NFC? What do you think is the best team right now when you look at which is a league where, it's so closely competitive, and even the 5 and 7 teams. Who stands out to you as the top team right now in the NFC?
It's crazy because you look in the AFC and there's a couple of divisions that don't have a losing team in it. The AFC North and the AFC West. There's the Cleveland Browns and the Las Vegas Raiders. I think also Denver as well. They're all 6-6, so nobody has a losing record. But if I was flipping on the NFC, Arizona, for whatever reason, has all of a sudden snapped into this winning culture. And, unfortunately, it's with a giant cast-off, Marcus Golden, who's having a great season out there with 10.5 sacks. And Chandler Jones has been, one of the best pass rushers in football over the last couple of years. But their secondary is playing great. They get a bunch of turnovers. Their run game is now clicking. James Conner, who was like a cast-off from the Pittsburgh Steelers, has 12 rushing touchdowns already on the season. We're week 14. He's got 12 touchdowns already. And so Arizona, to me, is the cream of the crop because they're doing it on both sides of the football. And Kyler Murray is now back and healthy. DeAndre Hopkins, who's one of the best receivers in football, doesn't even have a 100-yard game yet, but he's got 8 touchdowns. And so they're just kind of percolating, sitting at 10-2 after 12 games. So Arizona is there. Tampa, they're getting healthy at the right time, and so you can't discount them. And Tom Brady's going to win the MVP with 38 touchdowns and only 10 interceptions and just finding ways to win. I think it's 5 in a row or so. Green Bay is interesting as well, but to me, Arizona is the cream of the crop in the NFC right now, simply because they haven't put a full game together yet, and they've only lost 2 games, and one of those was Colt McCoy at quarterback.
It's a great point. I don't know why, TK. I'm looking at this team, and I don't know if it's because I don't like the head coach predetermined before he got hired.
That's definitely it.
It must be.
Definitely it, because I felt the same way. I was like, Cliff Kingsbury, what the hell has he done? He doesn't deserve to be head coach in the NFL.
Exactly. He failed in college. Now you're going to blow it all up with getting rid of Wilkes and Rosen. So maybe that, but I don't look at them as on the same level as the Bucs or Packers or even Dallas, to be honest with you. I know Dallas had a couple hiccups with Denver and the Raiders at home, but look, maybe you're right. They need to prove it, though, in the postseason. Would you agree with that? They need to prove
100%,
it.
100%. Last year, it looked like they were going to be one of the teams to beat. Then Kyler got hurt, and they ended up limping to the finish. literally, and they were 8-8. The season before, even though Kyler won the MVP or the Rookie of the Year, they were 5-10. So until you do something in the postseason, people aren't going to believe in you. And they got a pretty tough schedule to finish out with the Rams this weekend, not Detroit, but Indy. If they get up on you, they have one of the great running backs in Jonathan Taylor, to finish out the season, finish out a game. Then Dallas and the Seahawks, who were kind of surging a little bit after that victory over the San Francisco 49ers this past weekend. So they'll have to earn it. But you're right. I think they got to win a playoff game to make us truly believe that they are a team to beat in the NFC. But right now, you can't fault their record.
Well, exactly. 10-2. That's 10-2. One more on the NFC before we go to the AFC. You mentioned the Rams, Monday night big game against those Cardinals on the road in Arizona. Are the Rams done as far as all of us looking at them like a Super Bowl contender, or you think they still have a run in them?
No, I think they have some run left in them. I think that we looked at the whole Matt Stafford addition to the staff to this team, and what the staff was going to be able to do with that, and we saw it early. It was just like, man, he could throw the ball around the field. He makes all these great throws, and but I think what we see now is that their defense kind of took a step backwards, right? It's one of the best some of the best players in football with Aaron Donald and why am I forgetting the corner now? Off top, Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah.
Right. They have great players on that team. Leonard Floyd is there as well, who rushes the passer. But the defense has been middling for the first time in 3 or 4 years. Their defense hasn't been holding their edge of their side of the bargain for this team, and as a result, they're having to play harder, or at least more perfect on offense, and you get the injury, to your wide receiver.
Woods is out.
Yeah. Woods, Robert Woods.
Yeah.
You get the injury to him. Odell Beckham is there. He's got to get up to speed, so their run game changes, but their pass game is still more explosive. It's just moving pieces with this team. I actually think that they'll figure it out. I think the Rams will figure it out. They have a great coaching staff, both with Raheem Morris on the defensive side of the ball, and then Sean McVay as the play caller. I think they'll figure it out. There's just new pieces there that we kind of expected to just snap right into place. It did for a minute, and now it's just readjusting a little bit.
Talking with Tiki Barber. Tiki and Tierney can be heard here in this time slot starting January 3rd. How freaking good are the New England Patriots? Isn't that something to watch?
Well, it's just situational. We talk about them forever. It's just they're the best team in maybe in the history of football. It's situational football. Then you heard Belichick after the game saying, "quote This is why we practice in this. You know what? Right? The weather. But it's why they do it." Because you never know, especially playing in the Northeast, when you're getting a snowstorm and 60-mile-an-hour gusting winds. And, I remember when I was playing, it'd be cold as hell like that. And I'd be like, God, we got to be in the bubble. Hey, Fossil, hey, Coughlin, can we go practice in the bubble? But Bill Belichick makes them practice outside because you never know when that eventuality is going to happen. They have a great staff, and they got players that are stepping up, especially a young Mac Jones. And so I love what they're doing. Ramondre Stevenson, who nobody really knew before the season started, 250-pounder, goes 64 yards for a touchdown right at the middle of that Bills defense, which was still one of the best in football. Right, that's situational awareness, and it's hard to root against them. It's hard to bet against them. It's like my brother told me earlier this week. It's like there's two people you don't bet on in football. Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, because everybody thought that the Alabama Crimson Tide were going to get crushed this past weekend, and Saban just had them ready and destroyed Georgia.
Yeah, people were reminded quickly in that game, oh, crap, how could I do this again,
Exactly.
bet against Saban.
Exactly.
Who's beating the Pat? I mean, I know that they're not the most talented team, but look at the rest of the AFC. Where's the threat?
But Sal, but don't forget, they spent so much. Remember all the money they spent this offseason?
Yeah.
We all talked about it, like the free agents money that they spent. And they bring in a guy like Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry and Kendrick Bourne, who was kind of like a cast off. He's just a good third down receiver. He turned into a star, right? He catches shallow crosses and takes it to the house, right? Kind of like George Kittle did in San Francisco. Like they've gotten players to be elite in certain situations of this year, and that's all you need, right? You don't need a guy to, run for, 1,500 yards. You don't need a receiver to catch, 100 passes and have 1,200 yards. You just need that guy when called upon to make the play that wins the game. And it seems like every year, save for last year, even though they did have it at some points last year, but every year they just have that guy step up, whether it's Wes Welker or whether it's Edelman or whether it's Corey Dillon back in the day, LeGarrette Blount when he was cast off and comes there and wins a championship, Chris Long. Like it just always seems to like you teams to go there and they find ways to win. It's pretty amazing actually, and it's a testament to their coaching staff.
A genius at work with Belichick. It is just something. It's unbelievable. Now last year, obviously, he looked like the bad guy because Brady went and won a Super Bowl, but there were a lot of different circumstances. Now Belichick back on top where he belongs. Tiki, before we let you go, I mean, you're going to be taking over with Tierney here in this time slot on January 3rd. Let's talk a little baseball. Your thoughts on the Mets managerial search? I've been pounding the drum for Buck Showalter, like many others. You have a guy you want to see the Mets hire?
Why are you pounding Showalter right now?
Well, what do you mean? You talk about Bill Belichick, how great he is. Buck Showalter's an experienced manager. I want some experience in there finally for the Mets.
Yeah, but his last couple of seasons, I mean, he was way under 500. I mean, so I understand the Orioles spent like zero money.
Well, they have no right, exactly. They were giving up at that point.
There was no I don't know. I don't even know. Like,
well, their
commitment
payroll's
to try
nothing.
to win.
Exactly. It was. He got him to the playoffs at some point. But you look at what he did, and not to compare him to Belichick, but obviously he was a program builder. Wherever he went with the Yankees early on, Texas, Arizona, and then with Baltimore, he made those teams respectable, professional, made them good. The Mets are a win-now team. I just think he's the right hire. If not Buck, what would you like to see here?
I mean, it's hard to, because you never know, right? I mean, there's certain players that are out there, or former players that are out there. I know that the George Lombard from the Tigers, he's been getting some play because of his relationship with AJ Hinch and things of that nature. But ultimately, it's got to be someone who is both analytical but also old school, right? It's someone who can see it from a player's perspective, but also be able to talk to players in a way that makes them understand it. And I think in some ways, former players give you that good option. I mean, if I don't know who the Mets should go hire, but I do know that when I see, I don't know, some of these old school managers have success, it reminds me how baseball used to be, and I enjoy that side of it. You know what I mean? So I think of a guy like David Ross, who was in Chicago. He didn't have great success, but like he manages old school, and I think there's something to that. So off the top of my head, I couldn't give you a name. I'm sure in a month I'll have to figure out
You'll
names.
be ready, right?
But the Mets seem to be this cursed team that no matter what they do right, things always go wrong.
No, Tiki, you don't start with that. We don't want to hear that. It's changed now. Matt
I know
Scherzer's
that.
here, new owner.
Well, that's my point. So Uncle Stevie's here now, right? And he will spend the money. And at the end of the day, if you spend the money to get it right, you got to pick the right guy.
I will say one quick comparison, because I was just thinking about it talking to you here. I think Coughlin is a good comparison. Coughlin, well, he had success in Jacksonville, didn't win a Super Bowl there, similar with Buck Showalter. Also, Coughlin had to change his approach to eventually become successful. So maybe the people who think Buck will be rough around the edges, obviously he's got to learn and evolve here. Maybe he could change that and become similar to what Coughlin was to the Giants.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. But the question is, do you want young blood, or do you want someone who's got some more experience, like Schilt, right? Who was, for whatever reason, fired by the Cardinals at the end of the season, right? I mean, would that make sense? It's hard to know. But I do think there's a healthy mix of analytics and old school that works in baseball. Dave Roberts is a perfect example of that. You look at the Houston Astros as well with Dusty Baker, right? I'm sure there was some analytics in there, but there was just this feel that Dusty brought that made it okay for this Astros team to have success again, as opposed to us constantly wanting to hate them.
Yeah, and we'll see what the Mets end up doing. Buck Showalter, of course, being interviewed today, so many different options, and hopefully a decision made next week. Thanks, Tiki. Appreciate it. Fun talking to you.
You're welcome, Sal. Be good, man.
Yep, you too.